Welcome to the Eschatology Podcast, brought to you by Resonix. Visit ResonixSoundSolutions.com for the best ways to free your car, motorcycle, house, or spaceship from resonance with Resonix. And many thanks to Resonix for making this podcast a reality.
I can't wait to hear this intro.
I'm not going crazy like the last time. In fact, I'm not even going to do an intro.
Okay. What I want to know is why there aren't more old school guys competing in two-seat, because all of them say like their cars were the best thing ever and they would, mop the floor with everybody. But I don't see any of these guys. I don't know.
Oh, if you remember, we did the $10,000 Aggieland 1997 rules, two-seat, install, SPL, RTA, all the things. And winner takes all, $10,000, and all the same people that normally compete came out. So
that makes sense.
And I think there was 7 competitors. So I'm not really sure that that's the future.
Are you sure?
Though.
Well, it could be a future.
I don't see anybody coming out of the woodwork to do it, so.
Well, and it's going to be the same people. If somebody does, it's going to be the people who were already going to come out of the woodwork anyway. And is there a reason to shape shift everything else based on that? I don't know.
Probably not.
So, I guess the reason we're all here together today, Erin and Adam, again, reprisal, is that redo? What is that?
You said this was an intervention.
Intervention. What are we intervening?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Our audio problems.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, tough.
My thoughts, we discussed some things before as far as subjective versus objective, specs and those types of things that, people get upset about. And it seems like I don't want to say it's based on experience or number of years in the field or whatever, but it seems like there's this resurgence of first-year med students in the audio field who, have found data and specs and testing and tend to just kind of spew it out there with the expectation of going, aha, see, gotcha. And, one of the fairly famous interviewees on this, podcast quite a while ago, I'll pull up the actual. So during the interview, I asked him a specific question, and he asked me to stop recording. Of course, I didn't stop recording. I just cut it out of the interview, and I'm not gonna, play it back. But he basically said that if somebody was to someday figure out how to travel at the speed of light, and they went out in the universe and went to the very ends of the universe and time and space and conclusively knew that they had got there and back and were able to say there's no God, there's no heaven, nothing else. And he said it won't stop religion. It's not. And he specifically said, he doesn't have a beef against religion or anything. He's just saying somebody, there's a lot of religions out there. Somebody's got to be right and wrong. But, no matter what, if we found the end of the universe and it's not out there, people are still going to believe. And kind of saying that, hey, no matter how much you think you have, it's not going to stop somebody else necessarily from believing something or not believing something. So don't expect that as a result, which I think is something that he had gone into things thinking that, hey, look, I proved things are this way, and I'm going to fix the way people think about this, and it didn't really change anything. Erin, I think, has worked through finding that ground of using, and I think, Erin, your last video that you just posted in the last day, which one was it? Was it
probably
the
one today?
Yeah. today, I guess.
The multiple speaker comparison thing.
Yeah. So it was the MoFi versus Wharfdale versus Kef
Yeah.
comparison that you posted. And I think you started that out with a very good explanation of how you're not just making posts with, here, I used this fancy thing in my living room and measured the speaker, and here it is, and boom, conclusive data. This one's better than that one. Rather, and I'll let you explain it, but I mean, and I think your progression, you did do more of that, especially at the very beginning, long before you had the YouTube channel and everything else. It was more, you still went into the data and you explained it, but now I feel like you've found more of that balance of, this is what I'm hearing, and these are the things I like about it, and this is the directly comparable data speaker to speaker that backs that up, the data to back up what you're hearing, and this is how you can benefit from that, right? I guess what has led you to that over time versus just being data driven?
Yeah, why are you right, Erin?
Yeah. I don't think that I'm right. I think it just, it's just experience, right? The data, when you're talking about data, at least for audio, it's applicable to a situation. But when you move it from, let's just start from the top. If I get anechoic data, that's anechoic data. I can compare it based on the merits of that. I can compare speaker A versus speaker B. But kind of what I talk about in this newer video is some speakers are designed maybe to be used in a different way. For example, the Kef R3 Meta has a weird extended bass shelf, which a lot of DIYers will know exactly what that is. If you've modeled an extended bass shelf design, then you've modeled that. And what that does is it kind of starts to roll off like a sealed enclosure, but then it has an extra little bit of extension, maybe an octave or so down. And that is where the ported tuning frequency is. So instead of falling off like at 12 dB per octave, like a standard seal enclosure, or 18 or 24, like a ported type enclosure, it'll start falling off a little bit like it's sealed, and then it'll just have a little bit of a flare, like a little bit of a kick up, and then it'll roll off sharply. And the idea behind that is that you can place it closer to a wall without having a lot of boomy bass.
Okay.
Whereas a speaker that is designed maybe with the standard sealed enclosure or standard ported fall off rates, if you put it closer to a wall, it may sound a little bit, it will sound a little bit more boomy as opposed to being further out in the room. So that's a roundabout way of saying that the data was never wrong. It's just the interpretation or the understanding of the data. Data. So it's just about recognizing, what the data is showing you and saying, oh, okay, in this case, it probably means that it's better used for this, or it can be used in this situation compared to another speaker that may not be used that way. When it comes to car audio, man, that's just a whole different bag, though. I still stand firmly on, there is not one standard frequency response curve to tune to. I think each car is going to be a little bit different, and the speakers and the location and the aiming of those speakers are going to play a role. And if you try to tune every car to have the same response, number one, they're not going to sound the same unless it's the exact same car with the exact same drivers. They're not going to sound the same. And that's because speakers radiate differently. It doesn't matter what the on axis is if you also have response going to the side of the speaker.
And reflections.
Yeah, you've got reflections. You've got other things going on. So you can have a 4-inch full range speaker, and then you can have a 3-inch mid range plus a 1-inch dome tweeter, and you could tune them to have the same curve in the seated position, but they're not going to sound the same, period. So that's the other thing, is that we need to understand that. And once you understand that, then it makes it a little bit easier to go in and try to figure out, okay, well, what's going to work for this car, and maybe do a little bit of guessing around with and playing around with and seeing what makes sense. Maybe you shoot for a target curve the first time and see what you think. And then you say, it's too much high frequency, or there's too much mid range or something like that. So then you dial it back and you work toward getting toward a better sound.
The key word there is work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One element that you said there earlier was, having having an explanation to wrap around the data. And I think that's the important part, that you can't just put numbers in front of somebody without an explanation of and a comparison. I mean, it kind of comes down to a similar thing like competition in general. Like the only best way you're going to be able to compare or sort the best cars is based on the cars that are there that day in competition. You can't say, well, I got this score on from whatever judge over here in March, and I got, and this other car got the score from this other judge in June, and then say, well, I outscored that car, so mine's better. No, it's the numbers apply only on that day comparatively, against those cars with the same judges and everything else. Like, that's the whole point of it. So I think there's a couple key points there in what you're doing that I feel like other people could learn from that want to do something similar as far as doing data-driven projects like that, is share your knowledge of not only just the raw data, but then also have it directly comparable to other products, and then also be able to explain those differences in a meaningful way for the audience, more so than just this did these numbers. I mean, it's like comparing a 500 horsepower Porsche 911 versus a 500 horsepower F-250. Like, because they're both 500 horsepower, there's a lot of other things going on there, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing that I've watched Erin develop over time, and I'm sure he's got his techniques, but I mean, he's consistently testing the same with the same rig, the same way, in the same environment, and those are his results. And I think people have to remember, when I first started shipping out speakers, I ran everything through a DATS, and I tried to test every driver or batch of drivers that we got on an IEC baffle in the garage and measure it the same way. Well, it's not going to be the exact same spec as what they took with the Clio, the audio precision at the factory, with that data. And people need to understand that it's specific to that time. Like you were saying, Cliff, this is where you measured it, how you measured it. So now you can do the next one. You want to compare speaker A to speaker B, you have to do, all the variables have to be the same, and then you can evaluate your data. But I don't know that people actually understand that. We can't test all these things with different pieces of equipment and say, well, he tested this and this has this, or he tested this speaker with this and it sounds like this. Or I think that's where there's just all this information out there. And Erin's done a great job of being consistent when he tests everything. So his data that he's provided us is very consistent. And it's done the same way every time. I mean, builds rockets, so he knows what he's doing.
I don't mean I know what I'm doing. I'll say too that you just talking about getting TS parameters that can change, dude. This is fun if you haven't done this before, and for anybody listening, give this a shot, especially with mid ranges. Torque down your mid range into enclosure, sweep it with an impedance sweeper, right? Save it, and then loosen up the screws, and then sweep it again. You'll get different results. Even
just take one, take one from a garage that's cold and bring it in the house and measure it to the one that's 75 degrees in the house.
Yeah. So I mean that stuff matters. That's actually why I worked so hard in my previous home to keep the temperature when I was testing within the same temperature range between like 65 and 70 degrees. And now I've got the Klippel inside the house, and that's part of the reason is that I never have to worry. It's always a reasonable temperature.
Yeah.
So those things matter. But, like when I think about car audio, the question I have is, what are people getting hosed up on? Because I keep harping on the target curve, because that's the thing that I see the most is people targeting a curve. And I've talked to other people who have, maybe started a business, or they're trying to tune and they're trying to understand what to do. And that's the one thing that they get tripped up on the most is they say, well, I've got this curve and, so-and-so John Whitledge or the JBL
you just
curve.
had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Yeah. Or the JBL curve or the so-and-so curve or whatever. And I don't like it. Well, what's wrong? Well, okay. Number one, it could just be that you're not used to that sound, and maybe a week or so goes by and you kind of like it, and you get more familiar with what would be considered a more neutral in situ response, right? In the seat response. But probably the biggest thing is that curve is not for your car, not for your setup and your install. I mean, listen, if you guys know as well as I do, if you point your tweeters directly at you, and let's say that you have a sloping curve in-car response, right? And that's what you're targeting. Okay, that's probably going to be a little bit easier, and you're probably going to wind up cutting some. Actually, you're probably going to wind up taking the top end and bringing some things down. Now, turn your tweeters off axis, point them directly at each other across the cell panels. What's going to happen in that curve? More than likely, it's going to start to drop off on its own. So maybe you're going to go in and say, well, now I got to boost 7 to 20 kilohertz so I can get that in-car response to match the target response. And that's just not the right way to go about it. What you need to do is you need to reinstall your tweeters, right? That's what you need to do. If that's the curve that you want, that's what you need to do. Otherwise, you're going to be introducing distortion to the high frequency. Whether or not you're going to hear it will depend on how loud you're listening to it. But I would not do the latter where you're boosting the high frequency to make it match a curve. I would consider the target response and say, that's not something my car is easily going to do on its own. Do I like the way it sounds? Do I feel like I need to boost the high end? And if I do, then I probably need to think about reinstalling the tweeters in a different location or a different orientation.
No, those tweeters suck.
Well, they can't all be Carmatic.
That application.
Yeah, no, they can't all be Carmatic.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many variables that go. I mean, anytime you put anything in a car, it's just the more I do this and the more I learn, I just realize how dumb we are. But it's just such a bad environment. But I mean, if you have a capable driver that you like the sound signature of without EQ, that's going to be a good choice if you put it in good locations.
Yeah.
But I just can't get past some of the, if I'm testing in my 900 square foot open basement and I have it on an IEC baffle and I take it and go out and test in my 14 by 14 she shed in the backyard, I'm going to get different measurements.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
She said.
She said. But,
by the seashore.
Yeah. I mean, so you can't buy things based on that. The manufacturers, people should be informed enough to know who's providing what, and if it's quality, data that the manufacturer's supplying, and you can hear it, and it sounds good to you. That's what you buy.
Yeah, that's a reasonable explanation, especially for car audio. For home audio, I would probably say I don't want a speaker that's going to be naturally elevated. But for car audio, there may be some degree of naturally elevated if I know that I'm going to have to turn them off axis, and I want the response to be a little bit higher in level on the high frequency end than it otherwise would be. Right.
Right.
So, and that also goes back to the example that I gave earlier about the KEF, where it's got a low frequency kind of cut through it almost. And that works out well when you put it next to a wall. So that's a problem that's been solved, quote unquote, passively via the speaker design itself. Otherwise, what you're going to have to do is you bring it out 3 feet into the room and then you go, well, I guess I'm going to have to boost 60 to 100 hertz to get the mid-bass punch that I want. That's probably not a good idea. Probably don't need that speaker then.
Yeah. If you go to buy a set of home speakers, it's no different than if you go to buy a set of car speakers at a good shop. They're going to ask you what vehicle, how do you plan on using it? Just same thing, like what size room, what do you have for power, what surfaces are around. I mean, there's all kinds of things that, good salespeople are going to qualify to help you provide yourself with a better result. But that's why I don't believe in internet sales that much, but it's not always easy.
Yeah. Somebody actually replied in my video today. They were like, in my video, I talked about 4 different speakers and I said, here's the data. Here's what I heard in my listening. Here's how I correlate these things. But ultimately what I suggest is if you're looking at those, maybe buy a couple from somewhere that you can send them back and then send one of them back, send the one that you like less back. We don't really, we don't have the option otherwise to go to a store and demo speakers, or to have them let us borrow speakers and bring them home. My nearest hi-fi store is 2 hours away, and they don't even carry all of the brands that I would be interested in. But what do you do there? Then you have to go online and buy them at places you can send them back. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Huh?
I'll make videos of them for you.
You should do that, man, and then post them on Facebook so it gets even more compressed.
One of these days, I'm going to go to the home audio shop and record these Wilson Towers I've been listening to for the last year.
Don't do that.
Awesome.
I don't need you to do that.
See, that's so. How often do you get asked why you don't,
why I don't record?
Why you don't record the
audio?
Yeah.
I'd say at least once a week now. Which actually isn't that bad. It used to be worse, but I think I've answered it enough times that people have seen it and they understand. I'm just not doing that. Like there are channels that are for that. Have I told you guys no, I don't think I've told you guys my grand idea, or maybe I have. If I have, just stop me. But my grand idea was to have a separate channel that is not like nobody knows it's me, but now I'm letting the secret out. Have a separate channel. Nobody knows it's me. And all it is sound clips of the speakers. But I figured, at some point people are going to catch on because they're going to be like, this channel has the sound clip. At the same time, Aaron's got a review for it.
Isn't there a car audio company that did sound clips in a listening room blindly and played the speakers? And
yeah. Oh, I remember that well. Yes.
Was there?
That went over like a fart in church.
Yeah.
Oh, was that?
You
talking about Jerry Niebuhr? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
You're not. When he did his blind speaker testing shootout with the Don Scan hybrid audio. This was like 2010 or maybe before then.
I remember
this was
that
on
one too.
A manufacturer's website page. You could click and listen to the video, and then they'd reveal at the end which one of the speakers in the.
Yeah, hybrid was involved in that one too. I remember that one. It was AD, wasn't it, that did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that Crutchfield has the thing where you can go through and listen to speakers on your headphones. You can go in and say, I want this speaker, and this is the headphone that I'm listening to it on, and it will play it back. And you can compare speakers. And I will tell you, having heard hundreds of speakers at this point, none of the ones that I've compared on their website sound like what they actually sound like in the room. So while it's a great idea, it does not work.
Does not translate.
It absolutely does not translate.
Well, and I think that's, going back to an earlier point there, I think that's the reason audio is such or audio products are such a big thing on the internet as far as discussion goes, because you can't hear everything. You're making, especially in home audio, for most people, that's a once in a lifetime purchase. Like, I have in my living room right now the Acoustic Research AR-10s that my dad bought in the 70s, and he never replaced them with something similar or anything else, and you want to make that investment in the best way possible, and there's so many options out there ranging. There's no from an objective standpoint, there's no way of going, oh, well, here's the reputable company, I just buy from them. That's the hard part too. Like, so many companies may have a good product, but doesn't mean that all the products are good. If it doesn't fit your taste, like Macintosh, for example. I have a pair of Macintosh ML1Cs in my living room as well from the 60s. But, because Macintosh makes some really good amplifiers and this and that, doesn't mean they make great speakers.
Yeah.
So, people want to know that they're buying, the best thing for their money in any of this, and they rely on other people to do that. And I think that's why, especially, in the 80s, 90s, up to the early 2000s probably, and even some current, but you had your key competitors out there in car audio that manufacturers wanted those people to run that equipment, because people figured, well, if they're doing well with that in competition, it'll be fine in my vehicle. I can go buy it for myself. Right. That argument even used now, like on D-Class and JLHD amplifiers, for example. Mark Eldridge ran them, Scott Bowaldo ran them, blah, blah, blah ran them. Like, you can win expert championships with this. So why can't you use it?
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably correct. But, at the same time, who knows, especially back in the day, who knows how much, okay, yes, you said you were wearing Pioneer speakers, but were you really? I don't know. It's difficult. And I think people buy stuff from people they know, right? I mean, it's that culture of either if you're in the know of everybody, like you're going to buy from somebody you like, and you're going to figure it out. And most of the products now, I would say, compared to I like amplifiers, for example. Obviously, decades ago, there were, even 20 years ago, there were some very terrible amplifiers that nobody should be using, and it was, well, okay, yes, here's the good and here's the bad. Now I would say the majority of amplifiers out there, even if they don't make the power they say they do, generally within their capabilities are going to be good enough, right? From what our hearing standards are. When you were talking reputable stuff, I'm not talking, again, junk. And I don't know, again, I think people are going to should be buying that more based on the features they want, reliability, who they can go to when they have a problem, that kind of thing. And if they want something really fancy that looks really cool, fine, go for it. But saying that you're buying something just solely because this sounds better than that, same with cables, right? I know. But, it's like,
Careful.
if you guys knew how this stuff was, how your music was made, it's kind of like sitting there going, I want a fork that's been perfectly sterilized and has, coated with whatever fancy things to frozen 5 seconds before it hits next to my plate so I can eat it perfectly right. Meanwhile, 25 seconds ago, some dude had his dirty fingers in it, I think people want to know that they're buying the right thing, but I think there's also a point where we go overboard on that. Like, especially in car audio, if it's good, I would say most of the speakers out there, a lot of the, if you're picking like you were saying, Erin, like if you pick the right thing for the application that you're doing and the results you want, and you spend some time to figure that part out, the brand is probably less important in the fact that also we have so much resources in terms of tuning and everything else to get where we want, which is, more flexible, I guess, than home audio would be, right?
Yeah.
For sure. I think there's a good portion of people that are chasing a very, 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 partial percentage of an increase in performance when they do this amplifier thing. And, learning from Gordon Taylor about amplifiers has been super eye-opening. There's a lot more, 0.0009% of harmonic distortion at, 1K at 5 watts. Well, that's so far down the hearing spectrum. Like, yeah, it's nice, but that's not the end all be all. Listen to it, don't just look at the numbers.
That's so far down in the noise that,
yeah,
who cares, right? Like, that's part of the reason why I don't bother really trying to test electronics. Like I would like to, because I would like to review them because it's fun playing around with new toys, right? But
sure,
I struggle with, if I start reviewing electronics without providing some data, then, what good am I doing? But at the same time, it's like, dude, if I can just test it with like the DD1 and just verify it's doing rated power, that's probably good enough.
Right.
Like, I just don't think that stressing about
if you
the sound quality of an amplifier.
Yeah. 0.000 anything in harmonic distortion, you're good.
Maybe you guys think different, but at least in my opinion, what I've seen and what I can't hear, the differences between amplifiers, by the time you get everything installed in a car, you're doing more damage by hitting a single band in your tune by half a dB than you are the differences in the amplifier at that point. So, like,
yeah, I agree with that.
To extent, yeah. Somebody asked me what of all the amplifiers I've listened to and the numbers, and you look at everything, the total harmonic distortion is always so low in most reputable products that if you look at signal to noise ratio, when you get above that 110 dB mark, then when everything is tuned perfectly in a car, then you're going to, you might hear some of that. But at home, sitting in front of a set of towers with that amplifier, yeah, you're going to pick up a little bit more layering and stuff like that on certain amplifiers. But like you said, Cliff, when you put it in a car, I think we've lost, again, we got a bad place to put things. So they're chasing that decimal points of percentage of increase in quality. And I think at some point there's zero return on investment, but people like numbers. So,
well, and there too, I think there's more to it than just those specifications when it comes to choosing and spending money on an amplifier. Because to me, I mean, it's. I've made the analogy here too many times, but it's like a watch, right? Your Timex versus Rolex. One isn't telling time better than the other. That's not the reason you should buy the Rolex. You're buying the Rolex because it's a statement piece of its own, or an investment, or however you want to put it, however you want to justify that yourself. But same with the amplifier. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell someone who spent $2,500 an amplifier that their choice is meaningless because of a number that they may or may not be able to hear. If they're happy with it, cool.
Yeah.
I don't worry myself with what everybody else is buying. I just try to give the information that can be helpful to the decision.
For sure.
And then, dude, go buy what you want. Like if I had unlimited funds, there are so many things that I would buy that would be unnecessary.
Right.
So I don't care what anybody else buys. It's mainly just, it mainly comes down to when people are trying to say that something is for a fact, something that it's not. And for example, maybe like this amplifier is better than this amplifier, but it doesn't have near the power. And the power is probably what you need more than some other spec. So I would disagree with that. And then just examples along those kind of lines. But yeah, for the most part, who cares, right? Like who gives a shit what other people are buying as long as they're happy, and as long as, like, if your role is to guide people, then you just guide them. And if they don't want to take your advice, okay,
so be it. Right.
But don't stay up late at night, and don't be an internet commando where you're like, oh, well, you didn't blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody cares. I can tell you from doing years of that on the forums and trying to argue with people.
Right.
I wish I had better spent my time. I could have done so much else that would have been better. But here I am.
Well, like you are now. I mean, I think that's been part of your journey and how you've gotten good at what you do now in that regard, where you're doing objective data at a level that most of these guys wish they could when it comes to the commandos who want to spout specs. But you're wrapping that in a presentation that is meaningful when presented. And I think I know that's a whole lot more work on your part, and there's an art form that you've created there. And I think that's why back when this all first started as an idea, I mean, I think everybody that knew you knew that it was going to be a success, just because of the level that you, and this whole get together wasn't meant to be a salesman pitch on Erin, but I'm using you as an example.
I'm using it's a car audio thing. Most people aren't listening to or probably paying attention to my channel, but I mean, I do appreciate it.
But I mean, like you've taken this. I mean, I would say that the people who want to do the objective data thing and throw it out there and use that in their own way and their own, special purpose to help others, I guess, is what they're after. Mm-hmm. I think using where you've gotten to as a model for that is very good. And I would say a lot of those people are going to give up before they do that because it's a lot of work. But, I think that you're doing not you. People are doing a disservice to the community by just throwing data out there without without a presentation. I would say it's somewhere going back to my original opening statement on this. It's like it kind of does parallel with religion in a way where you can't just sit down with somebody who is indoctrinated one way or another and say, oh, here are the facts, and now you don't believe what you believed your whole life anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Right? Like,
definitely does not work that way.
Right. And I would say it's very similar for audio. I mean, especially the people who are really passionate about this stuff or have plunked down thousands of dollars for what they have. I mean, how many clips owners have you pissed off?
A lot.
Horns are the best.
Horns are the best. Actually, I like horns a lot. A lot of the speakers a lot of the speakers that I like the most are horn designs. That's the thing. There's always compromises. You got to pick what you want. I would be interested, kind of talking along the lines of there being more people. So I've not seen it because I'll be honest with you guys, I don't really pay attention to the Facebook groups much anymore. I just, I'm busy and doing my own thing. So I have to take your word for it that there are a lot more people coming out and doing the objective side of things and doing measurements. And I know that some people are making businesses of it, and I applaud them, man. If you can make a living doing something you love, kudos, man. I would be interested in seeing the follow-up and not just somebody reviewing it and say, I love my tune, but I would really like to see Jeffrey. I'm quote unquote calling him out. And this is nothing personal. I hope he understands this. Calm down, Jeffrey. You can unpucker your butt cheeks for a second. I would be interested in seeing somebody like Jeffrey, who is known for doing a lot of tunes and things like that. Maybe explain, like pick an example and say, all right, here's the curve that I landed on, and explain why he landed on that curve. And I would also be interested in the process, if the process includes the listener getting in and then giving Jeffrey his feedback, and then Jeffrey makes certain adjustments or anything like that, kind of after the fact. Because I can tell you that a lot of very popular and well-regarded loudspeaker designers will initially basically make a speaker flat-ish on axis, and then they'll go back in and say, okay, personally, I like a speaker to do this little thing, maybe a mild dip between 1 to 3K. I like a speaker to have a little bit more top end because it's going to be very narrow radiation on the high frequency. So I want to make up for that by giving a little bit more on-axis response sparkle, if you will, right? They make, what's the word I'm looking for here? Very well thought out decisions as far as what they do with their design. And it's not to the level of, it's like audio voodoo. It's not like, oh, I'm adding in some magic. No, they actually have a reason for it. You want to drop 1 to 3K because generally they find that the music that they enjoy the most and that their customers enjoy the most might be a little bit sharp in that region. So they design a speaker to drop that area. But then conversely, they have another design from another manufacturer, because a lot of these guys are freelance, where that area is flat through that response. But maybe there's something else going on. And it's up to them to make that decision. And I respect those kind of designs. The ones I don't respect are where it's just like it threw spaghetti at the wall and then it turns out how it turns out. And they say, well, you just don't know what you're listening for. It's like, no, you made a bad product is what you did. And I would be interested, kind of to bring that all back around, I would be interested to see some of these guys who are doing these business-based tunes. Again, that's completely fine and I applaud it, to maybe explain the choices that they make. And I actually think that that would help them sell more to customers, potential customers, because then their customers understand that it's not just they're not going to get the same thing that the guy got last week. It's not going to be the same target curve that the other guy got last week. And things are intended to sound the same, but they're not going to sound the same. That's what I'd be interested in.
I'm sure Jeffrey, and I don't want to speak for him, but knowing how thorough he is, and the guy probably tunes more cars than I guess 99% of the people out there, and has a ton of experience with using the tool he's chosen. I'm pretty sure he's, getting customer feedback with a remote tune. You say, okay, now listen to it. What do you like? What don't you like? He's pretty well versed in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I hope I didn't imply that he wasn't, just to be clear.
No, I just, he's pretty thorough. I mean, as far as, none of us are probably ever going to pay for a remote tune, but somebody that's got a really expensive system that, let's just face it, most of these dealers can't use a DSP anyways.
Yeah.
I was going to say I think a lot of what he's gearing towards is working in the industry with industry people as well, not just, competitors aren't really his target as much as working with the dealers to get them delivering a better product than they otherwise would have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
for sure.
And the reason I mentioned Jeffrey is because I know he's on the podcast recently, but there are other guys. Miguel Rios, he does stuff as well. So I know that there are other guys. I'm probably forgetting some, but that's the kind of thing that personally I would be interested in. Hey, you did this. Why? Why did you make that decision?
What I was going to say, I think what you're getting at too is kind of what kind of flavor am I going to get with your meal, right?
Or are you
Sauce
going to
you
add
up
a
your
flavor?
nuggets?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So why did you choose that target curve? Is that the same target curve you use for every car, or is that solely my own target curve because of the natural response of the system that's already installed? I think that's probably the better way to go. And those are the kind of things that I would, as a customer, would be asking before I plop down X amount of dollars. And, you guys talk about us as competitors probably wouldn't pay to have somebody else do our cars. I think that's by and far true for the majority of us, for better or worse. And that's all I wanted to say. And having been
I
there
have no
myself,
problem having somebody else tune it. I'm done tuning.
I had in 2010 was my first car audio finals. I went over to Kirk Proffitt's house, and then we went over to David Hogan's. And Hogan tuned on my car. I had done all the build myself. It looked like garbage, but it was my own work. And Hogan had tuned it up, and it sounded fantastic. And then I didn't want to go to finals with somebody else's tune, so I redid it.
Boo.
And I did all right. I think I got like third or fourth place, in extreme and not, or whatever Mod X, I guess it was at the time. And that was okay. That was respectable. But if I had just kept it with Hogan's tune, it probably would have gotten first place, But there's that aspect of like, and I think maybe it was Jeffrey, somebody you had on recently was talking about this. There's that aspect of like, I want to learn it myself, for better or worse. I want to fall flat on my face multiple times so I can figure things out and learn from my own mistakes. But
yeah, for sure.
There are others who maybe just don't have the time, and that's fine too.
I did the same thing. I mean, a perfect example was when I bought the G35, and obviously ready built, ready tuned, ready championship car. And God forbid I leave the tune on there. So of course I retune it by ear in the garage, and it sounded okay, but it went from first to last in sound quality. And, it was like, well, okay. And it was the same story with my Neon, even before that. And I had already learned this lesson. Like, I came out with my own tune. I was very proud of it, everything else, and then had help from people internally between that show to finals. And it went from, it was an okay car to, taking best of the day. So it was like, yeah, I can't do this alone to get there.
No, it's always, I mean, that's the great part of the car audio community is the ones who help. I mean,
for sure.
I have learned so much from so many different people, right or wrong. And, it's just, that's why I keep coming back to it. The trophies that are, stacked up in the corner, really, I kind of forget most of them, and I more remember about, who gave what demo and what impressed me or what I learned and how I got this or how I screwed that up. And so, but
I think with experience and with maybe just age too, but I think experience in this, like, again, going back to what Erin was saying as far as not caring what people buy anymore, like you stop trying to convince people, or at least me. I mean, when I started out, it was first year med student of, I learned all these things that other people must not know, so I must teach them all.
Yeah.
I need to share my wealth of information because I feel so excited about what I've learned now. And and then you realize that, well, they're not all excited to hear from you. They need to learn on their own path, and like, use that to help people along the way. Yes, when they ask for it or those types of things, but when you try to throw it out there as a gotcha and try to just prove things wrong, like, again, it doesn't matter. People are going to believe what they believe, and there are people who, I mean, Nick Resonix, happens to sponsor the podcast, but also, I mean, he's done, I think, a good job of putting together all that data in a comparison in a way to sell his product and make that available on his website and say, hey, here's the comparisons that are out there. I'm not just selling this based on marketing, but here's also the data that I've used to show that my product's the best. But again, when you're trying to throw it out there on the opposite side as a negative to say, this is why that's a bad product, or this is why these people shouldn't do what they're doing, or whatever, that's only going to go so far. You're not going to win a lot of friends, and the person you're trying to target is probably not going to change as a result. Having the data and presenting that is good, I think, especially when it's meant to uplift something, but you have to be very careful in how that's presented. I'm sure, Erin, even over the past few years of developing the YouTube channel and your website and everything else, you've probably changed even strategies along the way too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Even recently to meet the demands of what the audience wants. Because, it's the same for my level doing events. Again, I'm not there to make anybody but the competitor happy in what they're doing. Now I'm not making them happy in the results. I can't do anything about that.
What?
Not what I heard.
Yeah.
Well, except for Natan. He's
yeah. He pays well.
Right, exactly. He's got my PayPal locked in. But no, it's like, if you want an audience of people to follow your research, then I think that has to be presented in a meaningful way. And like I said, if you want somebody to see how it's done, Erin's the way. But I think that what you were saying earlier, because you had planned on going down like the amplifier path at some point, right? That wasn't just like a side thought, right?
Yeah, and I actually had the gear in hand, but when I finally got the quote from the manufacturer that makes the test gear, they quoted me two different options. One was $32,000 and the other was $40,000. And I was like, dude, I barely make $50 a video, so that's going to take me a whole lot of years. There's no way. So I did not do that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy what you do put out. I'd like to see you get back to testing drivers again someday. Maybe you don't want to. I don't know. Is that something you're not interested in?
Well, it's not. Yeah. So it's kind of half and half. Like, part of me just doesn't really care anymore, because at least for car audio, we use so much DSP. I just need to know what's going on at the extremes. And then I would just say, use a subwoofer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. Like, just use a subwoofer and then use a tweeter. Right.
Yeah.
But then the other part of me is still curious about when they come out with newer, like Purify, when they came out with some newer stuff. I was curious about that. So I don't know. I might. Right now, I just can't. I don't have the space to put the test baffle on, because it's about 4 foot in diameter, and the room isn't large enough for me to swing the machine around that much radius.
Yeah.
But maybe one day. But I just got, I kind of just want to get in and play around with, like I said, electronics, because that's fun. Not even because I think that they're going to sound different, but just, some stuff looks cool. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool to own that amp,
Right.
Well, even just the subjective user review, like, I liked this about this,
Right.
this preamp, or I liked the features in this streamer, or
right.
There's so many things you could review.
Yeah. And I thought about that, like, without even saying, look, I'm not going to tell you that this thing sounds better than this other thing, because I'm not that guy. If you want that guy, then there's a million of those out there. But I'm just going to talk about what I think about this thing from the user perspective, and let that be that.
Yeah. I guess when you run out of home audio speakers to test, you can do that.
Dude, I
don't think that'll ever happen.
There's so many that I want to test, like the big boys that are 200, 300, 400 pounds of pop. If I could get Magico to send me their big M9 flagship that's $250,000 a pair. That's what I want to do.
That sounds like something I want to ship across the country for you to test.
Yeah. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
And then
that sounds like something I want to unpack.
Right?
And then say, "Wait, this is great, but you get this $2,500 set of bookshelves and this subwoofer and be just as good."
Yeah. I heard a guy on the internet told me that.
It's a wild game. Home audio is just nuts. Like, it's like never ending. There's just so much out there.
There's so much stuff. Yeah. And there's a lot that's so similar, but they still sound different enough, and then there's subjective. Like, how does it look? Because in car audio, we don't really get into the aesthetic of drivers per se. You get into the aesthetic of the install, but
the drivers get covered up.
Yeah, right. The drivers, you're rarely going to see that unless it's maybe a mid range or a tweeter. And then sometimes, or most of the time, we cover them up with grills anyway, right? So you don't really get into that.
Yeah, no, they become pieces of furniture and artwork in your home. I mean, home audio is just, it's gotten crazy. But
the cool thing is there's a lot of them that sound really, really good. And they also look really good. And they're not, you don't have to spend $20,000 anymore. You know, you can spend $2,000 and get excellent pair of bookshelf speakers that look really good.
Just the active room correction that's built into these amplified speakers now is just insane to me.
Yeah.
Like how quickly you can make it just sound really good with what's built into the enclosure and everything now is just nuts.
So is there anything on the horizon that you see as far as groundbreaking technology in home audio, or is it still going to be the same thing that we've had for the past 30 years?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you see a lot of stuff out there coming in, whatever else, more than we do.
Yeah, no, honestly, look, if I want to boil it down, I would just say it's all a bunch of boxes with holes cut out.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's kind of the truth. And I've heard so many I've heard so many that sound fantastic that I'm like, I don't know if it could actually sound better than this. So the next thing is it's got to be able to get louder and it's got to look better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the breaking point. But I personally don't see anything that's groundbreaking other than just pushing the envelope of price versus performance and looks versus price as well. I think that's just going to continue to get better and we're all going to reap the benefits of it and things continue, luckily, to sound better and overall objectively perform better. So then it just comes down to a matter of taste. I like this speaker's looks more than this one, so I'm going to get that one.
Right. So do you have your own home audio system or are you constantly switching stuff out?
I'm constantly switching stuff out. Matter of fact, I actually thought about asking the people at MoFi if I could buy the MoFi SourcePoint 8s from them. But then I'm like, I don't really need speakers because I'm always getting speakers in. And right now, seriously, my reference for tonality is my car because I can tweak that and make it sound as good as I want to, you know? So
totally thought you were going to say German Maestro headphones.
Heck no. I should, though. But don't let anybody hear me say that about my reference as my car. But I mean, I think you guys know once you get a good tonally balanced system, it doesn't matter where it is. You know, the car, there are certain things that it can't image or stage as well as a good set of home speakers, especially in terms of like, you know, depth and width and things like that.
Zero chance.
Yeah, but it can still sound tonally really good.
Yeah. No, I get it. I understand what you're saying.
I was going to say with the experience that you have in car audio, it's one of those things where you are able to understand its limitations in the same way that somebody might use headphones as, say, they use headphones as reference for their car tuning, and everybody goes, oh my God, you can't use headphones. Well, but if you understand the limitations of it and what their ups and downs are, you can tune around that to a certain degree, right? So
yeah.
Headphones is another world that I actually just listened to a pair of monoprice open back over ear headphones that just blew me away. That were like $299.
Really?
Yeah, I was like blown away. And listening to $1,000 plus sets of headphones, one right after another, off the same amplifier, I just was blown away at the tonality and the quality.
What about the soundstage? Because I still haven't heard a set of headphones that make me feel like, all right, the stage is way out in front of me. You know, I still feel like my head is just in between.
Yeah, no, maybe it sounds bigger, but I don't ever know that I've never heard anything that really puts it.
I don't know how you're going to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, not from the perspective of, you know, an open back always sounds bigger and more open than a closed back, but
it just sounds more around you. It doesn't sound in front of you.
Yeah. Not at all like a live performance in front of you.
And I don't know that it ever would.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, if it does, that'd be crazy, but
I've heard people say that some headphones do, but I've yet to hear any. But maybe I've just not heard the right one. So when people talk about headphones, I will ask them like, okay, what do you think about this? So that's why I asked you. Because I'm like, I need to hear these headphones that do it. Because apparently somebody thinks that they do.
I think they're just hearing stuff that
They
they
might
think
be.
they can hear that.
They might be. Here's a question for you guys.
Huh.
And I think all of us who tune will appreciate this, if I say so myself. How long have you driven or had a car system with a tune that you know is just not that good, but you just don't care? You're just like, whatever. It still makes music, and that's good enough for now.
I've been driving the Durango now for almost a year.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm not griping about the tune. I mean, you've both heard my van, but I've never touched the tune on it ever. I've never opened the software, nothing. Like I've literally never touched the tune.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm jealous.
But so the reason I'm asking is because, I had the Myers brothers at Sound Factory do an install in my car, and it looks fantastic. And they did a baseline tune on it. It sounded great. And then I started putzing with it, and I got it to a point where I was like, okay, this is, it's getting there. But there's a couple things that I don't like that really stand out. Like it's got a really strong, probably 120 to 150 hertz bloom. It's just very, very resonant. And it wouldn't take me 3 minutes with a laptop to go in and just bring it down. But I'm too damn lazy to get my laptop and bring it to my car and bring it down. And then I've also got a rattle somewhere in the back. But again, I'm too lazy to get it because I'm just like, it's good enough. But I would not go to a show and compete with it. I would have to tune it before I go to a show because I know people will be like,
What are you doing?
You think this sounds good? Yeah.
Well, and
I'm just wondering if I'm the only one that's human that doesn't stress out about this stuff.
Yeah, I would say, especially the people like us that have to do this every day. It's like, it's all right. I'll just use the head unit and tune that out. I'd have to say, well, and like in your case with that 120, 150 hertz, that could be something just the mid bass breaking in a little bit, right? Loosening up.
Maybe.
In the back, I mean, if you had a little bit bigger sub in the back, maybe.
Yeah. Dude, that sub is ridiculous. I was at a red light a few weeks ago, and there was somebody that was there's a Nissan Altima next to me, and they had all these tinted out windows and stuff, and they had their windows cracked, and they were blowing out their smoke, and he was just pounding away. So then I pulled up the, I can't remember the name of the song now. I'll remember it later.
Put on.
But yeah, no.
Hell, Daddy.
No. It should have been a Jeezy song, though. I Might Forgive. That's a good one for anybody who hasn't heard that one yet. Just came out a couple months ago. It's by Pendulum. Is it Set Me on Fire? That's it. And Grayson Stracali, I think, was the one who introduced me to it. But that song, probably like 30 seconds in, it's got just this mean, just bass like thing going. So I pulled up that song and I skipped forward to it and just cranked it. And the dude, I saw him look over at me with a cigarette out of his mouth. And I was like, yes. And then I just took off on the green light. So a little bit of a bass head.
Your car has a lower floor noise than the rest of us.
Right.
That helps.
So, the signal to noise ratio is better in a Tesla.
Yeah, it definitely helps. But it also can work against you because any little bit of noise you are going to hear now.
I mean,
you can't just say, oh, that's the AC or that's the motor running or something like that. No, can't do that anymore.
It's no Toyota van, but it's pretty badass.
No, you're right. Man, Clifton, there's a Honda. It looks like your Toyota van, but it's a Honda and it's more squished in.
Yeah, the Acti.
Yeah, I pass it every now and again, and I always want to stop and take a picture of it, but it's on a kind of a busy road, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But now that I told you, I feel better.
I think it's an Acti. I thought maybe it's not the Acti. The Acti might be the little truck thing, but yeah, there's definitely a similar Honda version, and yeah.
Acti?
Cool. I think the Acti is a truck. I was thinking wrong, but
Acti is a truck. I'm Googling it now. This one is like a minivan.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It looks like yours, but just more short.
Right. More shorter.
Yeah, more shortest.
It's a little squarer too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it right now, but yeah.
I thought about stealing it and putting it on flatbed and sending it to you, but I don't know your address, so that's the only thing that's stopping me.
Shipping. That's going to be up there. I got a question for you two. And I know, Erin, maybe you both more so probably than either that I have, but these guys that are buying these cars and they've torn everything out of them and they're just purpose-built car audio cars. Is that going to be the wave of the future to be successful in these big classes? I mean, obviously, Nathan, his car is highly modified, but still not probably like what Head's Blazer is or Gil's purple car is, or, I see there's some big builds going on right now that guys are doing, and, Chris Pearson is Charger, and, you know, is that something you think is going to be the future of these higher classes? I mean, is that what it's going to take to do all this stuff and compete? Because as a guy that has to daily drive the car he competes with, and I have to be in those higher classes, like I have zero ambition to try and even compete.
Yeah, I don't know what Erin's call is, but I say, I mean, my opinion is no. I mean, I think most of the purpose built cars out there are from a decade ago. I don't know. So there's a couple things on my opinion. There is the people who finally build that car and everything else, unless they're extremely driven, end up being disillusioned not long afterward. And and part of that too is I mean, I'll bring up Black Betty as a good example. Obviously, previously with Scott, and then now Tim Smith is buying it, and there's been the controversy over that car about the amount of people who have listened to it and its demoing and career and everything else. Because I never heard it except in its iteration 22 years ago. But part of that is that one, you build a car that you throw out there as being the best of the best in the highest class, and you market it as now the highest scoring car ever and everything else. Add to that the amount of tens of thousands of dollars in product as far as leather and seats and this and everything else. Like, moving a bunch of people through a car like that isn't great for those products, such as the leather and scuffing and messing up paint and everything else, because nobody treats cars very good when they're demoing. And also, it's kind of like the example with the home audio speakers with Magico or Wilson or whomever, like having Erin test that. Like, what's kind of for them, what's the incentive there? Because the expectation is going to be so high. I mean, as soon as you have a car that is purpose built, that has 10,000 hours on it, that you say is worth $250,000, it's the best thing ever, you are going to be let down no matter what happens when you go listen to that car. Like, it's still a car. It's still car audio. Like, it's still the same shit underneath, right?
Oh, yeah. I 100% had that exact same happen. I've listened to several of those cars that I judged at finals and never had judged them, just listened to them to enjoy them. Mm-hmm. And then to sit in them with a score sheet, it was like, oh, they're not going to be happy. It's like, yeah, it was really good, but I mean, it just doesn't do this number and this number and this number per the score
and it won't. Sheet. There's still compromises no matter what, and so there's not going to be a car that is, and especially at that, again, our brains aren't going to let us go, well, this car took out all the stops, and so now it's going to be perfect, and then your brain is just going to immediately find the faults, because there's going to be faults, because it's still a car, like, no matter what. So there's no, for a car that is built to be nothing but the best in competition, and that's all it's meant to be, there is no incentive to demo it, because all it's going to do is get torn apart, at that level.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a matter of the owner, because that, like, what ended up being my G35 and is now wherever else. I mean, that car has thousands of demos in it. That's what the car was built for. On the flip side, it was like, okay, here's the purpose-built car, 4 demos. Go forth and chew it up. So, but that's what happens. It was the same for me, though, when I went from my Neon to the G35. It was like, here's the car I always wanted. I love everything about it. And then it was like, it was nothing kind of but disappointment after that, because it was like, well, it was everything I wanted, and I was kind of just happier having the thing that was okay and had an excuse.
Yeah. Well, it's like I listened to Bruce Miller's new 4Runner build that the Myers brothers did and tuned, and I got out and I just shake my head. I'm like, 5 speakers, dash locations, factory door locations, subwoofer. This is stupid. Why do we push all these boundaries to do so much more, and sometimes you just gain nothing?
Diminishing returns for sure, and that's where,
yeah. I don't know. I used to want to build a car like that, and now it's like I have to be in those classes to compete because I'm a manufacturer, which is fine. That's the rules. That's the rules. But I have zero desire to do that, and I kind of realized in this last year, I just quit looking at cars to try and buy something for a demo car. It's like I enjoy such a simple system, in in any other class, it'd probably be fantastic. But to compete against, an expert class or master's class or whatever they are, you've got these crazy builds in them, and yeah, they all sound pretty damn good. But I definitely can tell you I've gotten in cars with score sheets, and it's just a whole nother like, oh, well, shit.
But on the product sales demo side as well, I'll say that the G35 sold thousands more than Black Betty ever did. Black Betty sold Scott Bowalda. The G35 sold hybrid audio. I mean, that was the difference between the two. And the G35 sold it because of its limitations and compromises. It was like, look, and this was what, 2011. It was like, here's a car with a bandpass subbox with 6.5-inch subs with all Class D subwoofer amplifiers, HD 751s, not, they were the monoblock amplifiers and everything, no tweeters, like, how much can we throw wrong at this car? And that it was because of those compromises and limitations that made it attractive. It was like
that was a really cool car to listen to.
Yeah. And it performed great. I mean, that was the thing. Like at the end of the day, it did great. It wasn't the best, but it didn't have to be. It showed the product for what it was.
I mean, when Toby redid Ben's car and they did the full-on dash build, I remember the first time I heard Ben's car, he'd had it really gotten it dialed in when he just had I think there were 3s in the dash. It was phenomenal. I remember thinking, you can't see a single thing. It's so enjoyable. He's got it so dialed in. And then he says, I'm going to rebuild the whole dash and we're going for the full money. And I'm like, okay, well, after he did that, I was like, man, I still kind of miss the other build,
And you see the progression there. It was the same thing that happened with me. It's the same thing that happened with him. Like I can count the people, person after person that's happened to where, he got everything he wanted and it was like, okay, well.
So I should be okay with this then. So you've answered my question. I should just be okay with doing my factory locations and really enjoying it and tweaking it to the best I can be.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know. What do you say, Erin?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, my personal experience is that I went the route of building a very dedicated car in that old Civic. And then the next car and then this car right now are both using factory locations. And I like the simplicity of it, and I think it can still sound just as good. There's many cars, we all know them, that use factory locations and sound as good, maybe even better than some cars that have extreme modifications, no pun intended.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, my biggest thing is always tied to the comfort and the visual. Like if I've got to drive the car every day and I'm staring at a big old tweeter or a mid-range pod on my dash, I got to the point where I didn't like that. And it just kind of bugged me mentally seeing that. And it ruined the overall experience for me. And that's just a mental thing. I mean, like when I get in other people's cars, it doesn't bother me. But when I'm driving my own car and I see a pod taking up a portion of the dash, I don't like seeing that. And I would prefer to not see any speakers if I'm driving it every day.
Those are all good points, but at the end of the day,
I think one thing we've learned too over time, at least with the team and having, a plethora of vehicles to kind of draw from and see the differences. You can go way too far with that as far as the blue Buick where there was basically just no dash. It was just meant to be like to kind of try to simulate upright home audio's array in front of you. And with having no dash, it messes your brain up for a point of reference on Horizon and, everything else. Like, and I would say similar with like Pate's center drive Civic. Yeah, you you took away the imbalance, but your brain now immediately kind of thinks it's narrow because it's like, well, I'm used to having at least one part of it, whether it's to my left or whether it's to my right, like way out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now the whole thing is kind of compressed. So yes, it fixes imaging, and it fixes having to use delay, and it fixes a lot of those things, but it doesn't necessarily make it all better. So yeah.
That's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just say that was Pate Civic was one of the cars. I didn't get to hear it at finals. I wanted to, it just didn't. They wanted to get out of there, and understandable. But I asked someone, and they said, I said, well, was it good? And they said, yeah, but I said, was it just expectations? Yep, 100%. I think that was it. When you look at something like that, I think there is expectations. You think, oh man, this is gonna be so awesome. And it comes on, and it's still a car. I mean, not to take anything away from it.
No, but that's the problem. It's still going to be a car no matter what. And just what I did just now, what I bitched about other people doing, like you have so high expectations of something that when you get it, you realize that there's still limitations no matter what.
No, I completely agree with you. Those are good points.
Yeah, I was going to say, talking about being in the center of the car and balancing out the width and things like that. The one thing I always noticed was that the seat rail extensions I won't say that I never understood them. I understood the idea, but I never got the benefit of them because the trade-off is that the further back you are, the less width you have.
Yep.
And it's certainly on the left soundstage, right? And I don't think I liked that. I feel like striking that balance, not too close to where it's like the left speaker is in your left ear, but not so far away that it's practically in front of you now because there's not enough width off to the side. That was something that I just never really found to be helpful, especially when a lot of people were going with extended seat rails, and I would get in and I would listen. I'm like, yeah, this ain't for me. I don't like this. And then
you're going to get that tunnel.
Yeah. It just never sounded right to me. And that could be because it was sided bias. Maybe I don't know. But that kind of goes into the expectation too, is I remember when I used to go to a lot of meets, I would talk my car up in the build threads just to kind of get people hyped up. And then other times I would be like, it kind of sucks, just to like see what the difference would be. Because I was always curious about the expectation versus reality. I don't know that I ever found that there was anything that definitely worked. It's kind of like when some competitors will be like, well, I've tuned on it all night and it's not really that good. And you get in and listen to it, you're like, holy crap. They probably have been tuning on it for 3 weeks straight, but they just say that they only put a 1-day tune on it just to mess.
You're talking about the Steve Cook scenario.
Steve Cook. But I will say, Steve Cook, I have seen him in the parking lot at finals the day of with his dash apart.
It's all an illusion. It's all an illusion.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It was a second car that looked just like his that he had brought in, already torn apart.
I'm convinced he has a whole other dash. He had a whole other dash in the bed of that truck that he would just pull out.
He probably did. He was just out there with his electrical cord and sanded some stuff down, but on some dash that didn't mean anything,
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, the expectations. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, it's a game that a lot of competitors play. I mean, Steve Cook's one who. I mean, there's been several times I've got in the vehicle and I don't know, just got 5 minutes in it before I got here this morning. Don't expect much, and you get in like, okay, right. And Brian Mitchell, this was back like 2014, 15 maybe, and I think 15, and I got thrown in to judge California State Mecha Finals, and Brian Mitchell was competing. It was the first time I judged his car, and got in, and like 45 seconds after I got seated, then he claps on the window and opened the door, and he's like, "Hey, if you hear something off, just let me know before you keep on." And I got in, I was probably a minute into it, and I realized what he had done. I was like, "You son of a bitch!" Like now I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's wrong and what I need to tell him about to have him fix it. I'm like, well, no.
Yeah, Scott Welch has pulled that shit on. He'll get out and tell you, "Oh, your right mid base doesn't work." You'd be like, "What?" Yeah, I caught on to that pretty quick with him. But yeah, that's part of the fun of it, you know?
Yep. Absolutely.
No.
No, it's well, and that's the thing. Like your brain is set, like what you were saying earlier, Aaron, about the expectations again. There, like it, and that's where the game is tough, right? You have to. I think if you have something really good, you can play the game a little bit more. If you know you've got something good, then you can be like kind of set the expectations low, and that probably works in your favor. I mean, that's where, like, again, my Neon, nobody expected a dang thing out of it. So when they got in it and it sounded really good, they're like, oh, wow, I'm surprised. And then scores went up. But also, then there's also that thing where, you know, people on the flip side, there's those intangibles. They're like, you know, playing the game with speaker wire and this and that and certain brands and everything else to be like, well, this sounds better, whether you can necessarily hear it or not, but it's supposed to sound better. So here you go for it. So there's lots to play there.
Well, I mean, my Expedition, when I had all the Symphony amplifiers and the Brax DSP and the audio development, you know, $700 dealer cost sub, and you know, then I have my speakers in the front, and you know,
Right.
Somebody got out. I think it was when it was at finals in the barn in Arkansas, and they said, "Yeah, I'm a dealer and I sell this brand, this brand, and this brand." And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, did it sound okay?" And they go, "Well, it's better for the $25,000 amp rack you got back there." I was like, "Shit, I didn't think about that."
Well, that was the same thing that happened. And that's why I say Black Betty sold 0 speakers, because I mean that was
Right.
part of the deal there. Like, you know, it. Let's say you get in and you're completely blown away, and you say it's the best car you ever heard. Absolutely. You're not going to say it's because of the speakers that were in it. It's the $250,000 sitting around you.
Right. No, I get it. And it's just things you don't, I mean, for me, it was like, oh.
I just sold somebody else's stuff. Thanks.
Yeah. So, I learned real quick, I need to surround the product with things that are attainable and let the product speak for itself.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, you know, so.
When you're going to sell stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. When
Well,
you
there's
want to
also
sell stuff,
the,
it's different.
The aspect of, I heard this so many times when I was competing, is that so-and-so is never going to not be the winner because they've already won, you know, a couple times. So they would have to basically come in with no stereo to not get first place. And I know some competitors kind of feel like they're up against insurmountable, opportunities and not able to beat these guys because, you know, you got like Brian Mitchell and Steve Head and Nathan, who consistently top 3. Like, I don't know the last time that any of those guys weren't the top 3 in some major event. So I know that the newcomers might look at that and be like, dude, there's no, like, what's the point? So maybe that can be a little bit disheartening, but at the same time, I am happy to see that people are new. Like when I went to finals this year, more new faces were there than I'd ever seen before. So that was cool. You know, and luckily Steve Head and Nathan and Brian Mitchell kicking everybody's butt year after year hasn't discouraged everybody from competing.
I think people who say they want perfectly objective sound quality competition are kind of lying to themselves, because if you take those 3 out of it, let's say you go to a class, you know, this is how kind of SPL is now. Like everybody has their own term lab, everything else. Everybody can kind of know where they're going to come in, you know, unless they're playing at the top. Like, they probably know about where they're going to shuffle out at finals. And you see, I don't know if you went over to the SPL side during finals, but it was empty.
Yeah, I was blown away. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I was shocked.
Empty.
Yeah, I mean, but
and I think that's part of the thing. Like, I mean, when you know what the results are going to be before you get there, then what's the point of traveling? You know, and I get it from the get together standpoint and everything else. But I mean, sound quality competition still seems to have more attraction than just a pure get together in that regard. Like, people still want a reason to spend the money and travel and everything else other than simply just hanging out and listening to each other's cars. Like, they want some stakes involved. So I get it. I mean, I think why it still exists at the level it does. Anyway, did we cover all the reasons to do Facebook videos comparing speakers? I think
so. But you got to have German Maestro headphones
and a she shed.
Yeah, and a she shed. Shed. Yeah.
shed.
That was a commercial. I remember that now.
Yeah. Getting a
Yeah.
new she shed.
Yeah. It was like caught on fire or something, right?
Yeah. Jake
I do remember that. All right. Good times.
Well, there's a certain individual that tests speakers in his she shed.
In a she shed. Hey, I test them in my. Hold on. You talking about me?
I don't know. I always just assumed you had this big room because it always looked so big.
I used to test them in the garage, but now, seriously, I had the Klippel set up in the dining room in this rental house that I'm in. And then the house that I'm moving into in 4 or 5 months, it will be in the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
Dude, because it's a combined kitchen living room, like an open floor plan. So it's going to be in my living room / kitchen. I'm going to have my Klippel machine sitting there.
You need to send some Resonix for the stainless steel sink base so you can.
Yeah, I probably need to, so it doesn't. Yeah, so nothing resonates or rattles while I'm trying to sleep.
All right. Well, I won't tell anybody that.
Well, I appreciate that.
I feel like you're, I thought there for a second, like getting the Tesla and stuff, you're really kind of living the bachelor life, but now I feel like you're really committed to staying in the bachelor life.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm not doing this again.
Like, it's just going to be me and Mrs. Klippel Hardison.
Yes. And I'm hopefully going to get a dog in the coming years. So
there you go.
Have me a nice golden retriever that'll hang out with me. I don't need a woman because they don't like me anyway. So that leaves me with guys, and I'm too picky for guys. So
yeah, I get it.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah,
that's
you're gonna change your pronouns on that one, Erin.
Well, he's already got a universal name, so
I do.
I know. Talk to Text does not like the Erin. It's Ron or nothing.
Oh man, you done messed up, Erin.
Erin.
Oh,
I think we covered it. I sure enjoyed it.
Cool.
Yeah,
Me
man.
Too. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, y'all too.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Hello.
How about the ones we especially like?
Which ones?
You know, the ones with the cars that go.
I hear you.